Well guys, welcome to our next episode. I'm super excited about this one. You know, we've had a lot of requests. People ask us about coffee. Is coffee a good thing? Is it a bad thing? So I said, why not go to the expert? So I'm here today with a good friend of mine, Ryan Lemley with Ridge Roasters. And what's unique about Ridge Roasters, they are a micro roaster here in the Morgantown area. So I'm going to let Ryan introduce himself, tell us a little bit about how you got into the coffee business and the industry and everything else.
Sure. Well, I'm Ryan Lemley, Ridge Roasters Coffee, as you mentioned. We're a small micro roaster in the area. What that means is we roast small batch beans, no more than usually 7 pounds at a time. We got into coffee just kind of on a whim. We went on a vacation to Columbus, Ohio, my wife and I, and went into this small cafe that someone suggested to us. And just by sitting in that place and having the coffee brewed for us in front of us, at that kind of moment, we fell in love with it and wanted to learn how to do that for our community.
Right? Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about coffee beans themselves. Where does a coffee bean come from, and how do we get it from a plant source into what we see, you know, in a retail location or in a bag? All
right, coffee's kind of grown or is grown in the tropical regions of the world. It's not something you can really grow in the United States other than Hawaii because of the soil content. The main source, one of the main sources in the world is from Africa or Ethiopia, and we do a lot of our purchasing from the Ethiopian bean. Also, where our trip was taken to was Colombia, was Supata, Colombia, and we were able to go and embed ourselves with the people of that farm for a week and just help them out in learning the process of harvesting the bean, milling the bean, and then after it's milled, it's dried and then shipped to processing.
Excellent. So when coffee arrives here then in West Virginia, it's actually a dried bean, is that correct?
Correct. It's in a dried form. They call it a green coffee bean, which is raw, and it's typically shipped in burlap sacks, and inside of that sack is another plastic bag that preserves the freshness of the bean.
So you had shared with me as we were talking about coffee, and the flavor profile from coffee itself comes from the roasting process.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
It happens, also the beans will pick up flavors from the region that they're from. For example, our Ethiopian here is going to have notes of floral in it and honey and some cherry, just based upon the region of Ethiopia. And then our Sumatra here we have is also something that's going to pick up more earthy tones, dark chocolate, juicy things like that.
Yeah. So there's no flavor added to it. It's actually what's happening in the natural growing process. Is
Correct.
That right?
Yeah. It's what's happening in the natural growing process, and then also when you're roasting it with the duration of the roast and also the heat that's added to it.
So am I correct in saying then the longer that you're under a higher temperature, you're under that heat, the longer you roast it, the darker the roast would be?
That's correct.
Yeah. You know, Ryan, one of the things that I'm always asked as a healthcare provider is coffee healthy for you? And, you know, there's this big misconception that, you know, coffee can be an evil. Coffee, the stimulant in coffee is caffeine.
Right.
And of course, caffeine, unless you're a person that's dealing with an adrenal gland issue or you're really sensitive to caffeine, it actually has a lot of health benefits to it. So, and I know your background, we talked a little bit about that, is actually you have a master's in physical education.
Correct.
So you kind of understand the importance of nutrition and how it plays into exercise and physiology of the body and everything else. You know, one of the secrets that I always tell people is that when you wake first thing in the morning, your adrenal glands produce this hormone called cortisol, and it's usually elevated first thing in the morning. So you may not be super beneficial in taking that cup of coffee first thing in the morning. It might be nice to wait till like mid-morning or in that mid-afternoon where you get that little drop of energy to see that stimulation come back with the caffeine.
Right.
You know, coffee, however, has been that choice for a lot of people. There's so many, again, benefits from it. One of them is it's loaded with antioxidants. And interesting enough, if you look at the research of coffee, the Western diet gets most of their antioxidants from coffee, more so than they do from fruits and vegetables. That to me was amazing.
Right.
So
incredible.
Again, lots of little health benefits of what actually takes place and happens with coffee. One of the things that we always get, Ryan, is patients will ask us, well, if I drink caffeine, it's going to dehydrate me. And that's somewhat true if you have a massive amount. So
Right.
if you stay within that 1 to 2 cups of coffee per day, it actually has the opposite effect on it. It's not dehydrating. It's when you get into massive amounts of it that it really causes some issues or problems. again, there's tons of health benefits associated with, and studies that have been done showing the benefits of coffee, from things like prevention of type 2 diabetes, from Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Caffeine stimulates an area of the brain that keeps that cognitive function up, and that's why when people have a cup of coffee, they seem more alert, they seem more awake, and the brain's able to function a bit better that way. We've even seen it in chronic disease processes like liver disease. Any kind of disease process where you're dealing with oxidative stress on the body, the antioxidants in coffee can be very, very helpful. I know that Ridge Roasters has partnered with Chill Athlete.
That's correct.
Right?
Right.
And so talk to me a little bit, especially with your background again in physical education and exercise, why coffee would be so good as like a pre-workout drink.
A lot of instances with pre-workouts that are on the market right now, you find a lot of products that have a lot of chemicals and added stimulants that people don't really react well to. People are developing jitters and upset stomachs and headaches, and it also causes people just to have other health concerns. So we decided to collaborate with the Chill Athlete, another local company here in Morgantown, to come up with something that was good for athletes and something that they could take on a daily basis, whether it be before a workout or in the middle of a workout, that wouldn't upset their stomach, didn't have all the added chemicals, and it was something naturally occurring in the environment. So we decided to start the Chill Athlete cold brew coffee, which is actually a lot lighter or a lot easier on the stomach for some people. And it's something you can make ahead of time. You can sip throughout your workout. You can add it to your protein shakes or what have you.
Is there a big difference in pH when you're cold brewing as opposed to using hot water?
A little bit, yes. But studies have been found that actually there's a third less acidity in a cup of cold brew coffee as opposed to coffee that's brewed hot. That's one of the studies that was done with the Toddy cold brew system. So if people have issues with the acidity levels on their stomach with hot coffee, cold brew is a perfect alternative.
So there's a lot of different techniques in making that perfect cup of coffee. Right. Talk to us about some of the options that people could use.
Well, some of the options, and most people would recognize this one probably right off the bat, is the French press. This is obviously probably a 10 or 12 cup French press. And it's a pretty simple method. It's essentially just putting the grinds in the bottom of the vessel, pouring your water on top, and then inserting the plunger and lid on and pressing after about 4 minutes. And once you've done 4 minutes, you've got a nice heavy-bodied cup of coffee, which is in some aspects something that a lot of people prefer. For those that don't necessarily prefer a French press, you have two other options. One is the Chemex, which is something that most people would probably recognize now. They've become a lot more popular in the last couple years. They produce a really smooth cup of coffee in the same rate as the Hario V60, which is just a smaller version and a pour over. Both are things where you just insert the grinds into these little filters that you purchase, and you pour water on them. You let the coffee bloom, which is just releasing the gases that have been that are coming out of the beans from the roasting processes once they've ground. And then you'll add different ratios of coffee and water to produce whatever brew you're looking for. And once you're done, cleanup is easy. You just simply throw the filters away and you've got a nice clean cup of coffee.
Very nice. One of the things I want to point out about the French press is it gets a lot of bad publicity because of some of the oils and leftovers, because it's an unfiltered coffee. Right. And one of those chemicals is actually a calf stool. And there's been some studies that's shown that can be detrimental to your health. And so as you're talking about filtering that cup of coffee, I think that's a great option for people to understand. Right. Now, there's a difference in filters.
That's correct.
And so you can have a bleached filter or an unbleached filter.
Right.
Yeah. What do you recommend to your clients?
We prefer pretty much the unbleached filters. When we purchased these were the only ones available, so we went with the bleached ones. But what we recommend with anybody is once you get the filter and you're ready to use it, before you put any of the coffee into the vessel, you want to rinse these filters off. And what that does is it releases some of the paper tastes. It gets rid of that, and it simply just, once it's brewed through or released into the vessel, you just dump it out and then insert the filter again and then the coffee, and you're ready to go.
Very nice. What is the perfect temperature of that water to be pouring over that?
It just varies. Most of the time it's suggested to be right around 205 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just off the boil. Some coffee pots obviously don't reach that. most coffee pots are only going to reach 180 degrees, so you really don't get the full extraction from that coffee. That's why we suggest manual brewing, because you can pretty much reach that level every single brew. And something to invest in is just a simple kettle. You can find them on Amazon, and they're relatively cheap.
And I think one of the most important things is for people to realize that all coffee is not created equal. There's some coffees on the market out there that are loaded with toxicity. They're loaded with chemicals in the decaffeinating process. But you've told me a little bit about a different way, the company that you work with, and how they decaffeinate their coffee. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's called the Swiss water process, and essentially they're taking the coffee beans and putting it into water, and they are adding sugarcane to it. And with that sugarcane, the sugarcane in reaction to the water actually will pull the caffeine out of the bean itself. Now it's not 100% decaffeinated. Studies have shown it's right around 98 to 99% caffeine free, so you still get a little bit of caffeine in each cup.
Okay, Ryan, tell me your favorite way, from the coffee guy, how to make that perfect cup of coffee.
All right. Well, this is kind of where I'm in my element. I get to make coffee for someone, which is something that I really enjoy doing. Anytime we have friends over, it's something I always want to do for them. So my favorite way is the Hario V60 Method, which is pretty simple. You can purchase these on Amazon. They're like $30. What we do is we've already got the coffee in here. We've pre-ground that it's 25 grams of coffee that we've got in the bottom of the filter here. And all we're going to do is we have our water here just off the boil, and we're going to add some water into the coffee rather. We'll let it bloom for a few seconds, and then we'll go through and then just kind of watch the process as it goes.
So as you're using this method, how long do you wait?
We do here, this is about half, actually we do a little bit more water than what we have in here. Right now we have 25 grams of coffee, and we use 50 grams of water just to pre-infuse it. And what we do is we can wait either 35 to 45 seconds, just depends on what you're looking for. We typically go around 30 seconds. And then once we go from there, we're going to look to achieve 400 grams of water in this brew. We're just going to go in slow and concentric circles in the coffee, trying to stay away from the outer edges to avoid some of that paper taste that might still be in there. And then once we get to 400 here, we'll just over the slow pour, we'll be able to have a cup of coffee.
So we're ready to enjoy that perfect cup. Let's see how this came out.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, that's awesome. So, people want to get a hold of you. They want to purchase coffee. What's the easiest way for them to get a hold of you?
Easiest way is ridgeroasters.com on the internet. We're also on Facebook, just at Ridge Roasters, and we do a lot on Instagram right now, and we're Ridge Roasters Coffee, all one word.
Excellent. Sounds great. Well, listen, I really appreciate you sitting down with us and teaching us a little bit about coffee, the benefits of coffee, and how to make that perfect cup of coffee. And what's the tagline you always say?
Say, live it, drink it, experience it. Coffee.
Love it. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.